Hello and welcome to another fantasy football tournament series number 93. This is the Antipodes Cup. What is an antipode? Well, antipodes are any 2 points on the surface of the Earth that are on the exact opposite side of the planet from each other. And about 15 to 20% of the world's nations, if you were to dig a hole through the Earth, you'd end up in another nation. Because the world is 70% water, this eliminates the vast majority of countries where you would end up in water on the polar opposite side of the world from any given location. This is sort of a new concept for a fantasy football tournament. This is a geography-based one, and I figured, you know what? Let's go ahead and give this a try. So, the vast majority of nations that have an antipode country are those that are within South America, Southeast Asia, and Oceania. Those are usually the only nations on Earth that have an antipode country, with a few exceptions, one being the US, and from Europe, the exceptions being Spain and Portugal. You also have a few African countries that are antipodes as well, but most of them are not. So I've gone with a 32-team tournament. And now the format for this is something new on my channel, something I've never done before. There is no single host nation. It's just 16 pairings of home and away draws, and all the way from the round of 16, or the round of 32, rather, until the final. So it's kind of like a Champions League knockout stage bracket, so to speak. Everyone plays home and away from home. And the pairings are based exclusively on nations that are antipodal to one another. And I'll go through, this will be a neat little geography lesson as well. So on this side of the bracket, we have Portugal versus New Zealand. Two countries on the opposite side of the world of each other. New Zealand, if you dug a hole through New Zealand, you'd end up in either Portugal, Spain, or Morocco. For the most part, you'd end up in Spain, but I already have African nations here represented. I want to have this as diverse as possible. And I basically flipped a coin between Portugal and Spain, and Portugal was the representative in this tournament. We have Taiwan versus Paraguay. USA versus Namibia. Fun fact, actually kind of funny about the USA. The United States is almost unanimously, if you were to dig a hole on the other side of the world, you would end up in the South Indian Ocean. But the US qualifies for this tournament because the single state of Hawaii, if you were to dig a hole to the opposite side of the world, you would end up on the border of Namibia and Botswana. It is the only place in the US where you end up in another country. You have to, technically, you could dig a hole in the extreme north of Alaska and end up in the French Antarctic Islands, but that's not an independent nation. It's just an overseas territory. But Hawaii is the only state, not part of the continuous states, outside the mainland, where you can end up in land on the other side of the world. And because of that, the USA technically qualifies. We have Ecuador versus Malaysia. Uruguay versus South Korea. Only part of South Korea, though. If you dig a hole through the island of Jeju, off the coast of South Korea, you end up in Rocha, in eastern Uruguay. Algeria, Tonga, Vietnam, Peru, and Bolivia versus the Philippines. On the other side of the bracket, we have Argentina versus China. Mongolia versus Chile. Something happened to my Mongolian flag. The upper right corner kind of tore off. I have to fix that. Sorry, Mongolia. I will fix it, though. Solomon Islands versus Guinea-Bissau. Brazil versus Japan. Japan also loosely qualifies for this tournament because the southern islands of Ryukyu and Naha, you end up in, I believe, central Brazil. We have Tahiti versus Sudan, Indonesia versus Suriname, Senegal versus Vanuatu, Mauritania versus New Caledonia. A very strange mix of countries here. But that's just how it is geographically. So let's go through 5 minutes into the vid, I had to just get past the whole explanation of things. Let me take a seat, actually. Been standing for a while today. So, the opener, we have Portugal versus New Zealand in the first leg. I had this being a 5-0 win for Portugal. In the second leg, New Zealand versus Portugal. Had this being a 3-1 victory for Portugal. So Portugal wins 8-1 on aggregate over New Zealand. They actually met each other in the Confederations Cup in 2017. I had no idea at the time that they were antipodal countries. Very cool. Taiwan, you're going to see a lot of mismatches here, folks. Taiwan versus Paraguay. These are teams that would, otherwise almost probably never play each other. Taiwan versus Paraguay. I'm going to go with a 3-0 win. Well, I'm going to be kind on the road. Paraguay probably doesn't send us a full-strength squad. 2-0 on the road for Paraguay. And then at home, I go with a 4-0 win for Paraguay, so 6-0 in aggregate. USA versus Namibia. I think the USA would win this. Namibia is they're not among the strongest sides in Africa, so I'm going to go with a 3-1 win for the US at home. And then a 1-1 draw in Namibia. And 4-2 on aggregate, the USA goes through. Ecuador versus Malaysia. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine Malaysia flying to Quito at the Estadio Atahualpa? Quito, along with Bolivia, being, high altitude. I said high altitude. Oh, gosh. Altidore, Josie Altidore. High altitude, along with La Paz, Bolivia, as we'll see the Philippines take on in just a minute. Ecuador versus Malaysia at home. I'm going to go with, I think a 5-0 win for Ecuador. Well, yeah, I'm going to say 5-0. And then on the road, I'm going to go with a 4-1 win for Ecuador. So 9-1 on aggregate. Ecuador goes through. Uruguay versus South Korea would be one of the more closer, juicier clashes. I've got Uruguay winning at home in Montevideo. 3 goals. I'm going to say Uruguay wins at home 2-0. And then the return leg, South Korea wins 2-1. But Uruguay still advances on aggregate 3-2. So this would be one of the more interesting, closer clashes, if I got to be honest. But Uruguay goes through 3-2 on aggregate. We have Algeria versus Tonga. Oh, man. This is like no exaggeration. This is 12-0 for Algeria. Tonga is one of the worst teams in the world. They're the worst team in Oceania, so use your imagination. 12-0 for Algeria over Tonga. On the road, I think it'd be like 8-0. So I see Algeria winning this 20-0 on aggregate. This might be a historic moment on my channel, folks, in this series. I don't think I've ever predicted anybody to win 20-0 on aggregate. But Algeria just sends Tonga to Mars, basically. Vietnam versus Peru. I'm going to go with I want to say a 2-1 win for Peru on the road. Vietnam's one of the more improved teams in Asia. And then Peru will win at home 3-0. So Peru will win 5-1 in aggregate over Vietnam. Then we have Bolivia over versus Philippines in La Paz. Going to go with a 4-0 win for Bolivia at home. And actually a 1-1 draw in Manila between Philippines and Bolivia. So Bolivia goes through 5-1 in aggregate. South American teams are dominating. Argentina versus China. I'm going to go with I think a 6-0 win for Argentina over China. I think they will give China a thumping, let's say at the Bombonera. And then China versus Argentina. I'm going to go with I guess a 2-1 win for China. No. What am I saying? They'll send a second string side. China will score, but Argentina will win this 3-1 and 9-1 on aggregate. China's not a horrible team, but I just think Argentina would really put a beating on them at home. Fun fact, if you dig a hole through the Uruguayan-Argentine border, you end up in downtown Shanghai. Mongolia versus Chile. This is another strong, mismatch here. I'm going to go with Chile to win this one away from home. I say 5-0. A lot of 5-0s in this tournament so far. And then at home, Chile wins 7-0. So Chile wins 12-0 on aggregate over Mongolia. Solomon Islands versus Guinea-Bissau. I don't know how I would predict this. I mean, Guinea-Bissau would win. But it's hard to predict a two-legged aggregate over two countries that are likely never going to meet each other. A 4-2 away victory for Guinea-Bissau. I think the Solomons would hold their own here in Honiara. And then a 3-0 win for Guinea-Bissau at home to win 7-2 on aggregate. Brazil versus Japan. This would be an interesting game. So Brazil wins at home. I think I really do rate Japan highly. I think they're the best team in Asia on current form, but Brazil is just way too strong. So Brazil wins this match. I'll say 4-0. And then I'll say 2-1 win for Brazil on the road because they'll send a second string side. So 6-1 on aggregate, Brazil wins. But that's not really reflective of Japan. That's just how good Brazil are. Tahiti versus Sudan. Sudan wins this game 4-0. Yeah, I'll say 4-1. Sudan beats Tahiti 4-1. And then at home, Sudan beats Tahiti again. I don't know. 4-0 actually this time. So 8-1 in aggregate, Sudan wins. You get some really weird, lopsided scorelines here. Indonesia versus Suriname. Gonna go with a 2-0 away victory for Suriname. And then I'm going to go with a 3-0 win for Suriname, 5-0 on aggregate. Suriname, a team to look out for in CONCACAF competition in the future. They just got promoted to League A. Senegal versus Vanuatu. Going to go with a 7-0 win for Senegal. and then a 4-0 win for Senegal to win 11-0 on aggregate. And lastly, for the round of 32, Mauritania versus New Caledonia. Going to go with a 3-1 victory for Mauritania. I do think New Caledonia is one of the better sides in Oceania, though. And I think they'll put in a respectable 2-2 draw at home. So Mauritania wins 5-3 on aggregate. But New Caledonia does themselves proud. So this is the long video. Moving on to the next round, we have Portugal versus Paraguay. USA versus Ecuador. Uruguay versus Algeria. Peru versus Bolivia. Then we have Argentina versus Chile. Guinea-Bissau versus, I think it's Brazil, yes. Then we have Sudan versus Suriname. Senegal versus Mauritania. So this is the round of 16. Portugal versus Paraguay. We're going to go with a 2-0 win for Portugal at home. And then Paraguay versus Portugal, a 0-0 draw. So 2-0 for Portugal, then 0-0. Portugal gets to the quarterfinals. USA versus Ecuador. I do think the United States will win this, and I'll tell you why. Ecuador is in a really bad slump at the moment. I mean, so are the US, but we tend to match up very well with Ecuador. I think we've beaten Ecuador in 4 of the last 6 times we played them, and the other 2 were draws. And I do think we're better than a team that is probably, after Bolivia, the worst team in South America currently. I think the U.S. will eke this out. I'm going to go with a 2-0 win at home for the U.S. But this will be close. And then a 3-1 victory for Ecuador, but the away goals rule goes in favor of the U.S. 3-3 on aggregate. The away goals rule 3-1. I honestly, I think I'm being generous to Ecuador by saying they win this match. They win 3-1 because they just historically they don't match up well with us at all. But USA goes through. Uruguay versus Algeria at home. Gonna go with just a 1-0 victory for Uruguay in Montevideo. They'd be in for a real fight here. 1-0. And then I'm gonna go for a 2-2 draw in Algiers. So Uruguay goes through to the next round, 3-2 on aggregate. Peru versus Bolivia. Going to go with a 3-0 win for Peru at home. And a 1-1 draw in La Paz. In the return leg, 4-1 on aggregate. Peru goes through. Argentina versus Chile. Well, they hate each other by now, don't they? So, first leg, I'm going to go with a victory for Argentina and say that they win that match. 4-2. And the return leg, going to go with a 0-0 draw in Santiago. So 4-2 in aggregate, Argentina goes through. Guinea-Bissau versus Brazil, 2 Portuguese-speaking countries, going with a 2-0 win on the road for Brazil. And then going for a 5-0 win for Brazil at home to win 7-0 in aggregate. Sudan versus Suriname. One of these teams will be in the quarterfinals. That's just the luck of the draw. Sudan versus Suriname. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw in Khartoum. I really do rate this Surinamese team. And then I'm going to go with a 1-0 win a goal by Gleoflio Vleiter, who was one of the top scorers in the CONCACAF Nations League this season. So 1-0 win for Suriname. Suriname are into the quarters. Wow. 2-1 on aggregate. Senegal versus Mauritania. Going to go for going to say a 3-1 win for Senegal. And then I'm going to go with a 1-0 win for Senegal. So 4-1 on aggregate. Senegal gets to the quarterfinals. So the quarterfinals of the Antipodes Cup, we have Portugal versus USA, Uruguay versus Peru, Argentina versus Brazil, oh boy, in the quarters, and Suriname versus Senegal. Get a good look. So Portugal versus the United States, I'm going to go with a 3-0 win for Portugal. And then I'm going to go with a 2-1 win for Portugal. So Portugal beats the USA 5-1 in aggregate. Uruguay versus Peru. Going to go with I think Uruguay gets revenge for the Copa America loss on penalties. 3-0 at home over Peru. And Peru wins the second leg 2-1. So Uruguay actually has lost 2 games already, but they're into the semifinals because it's a 2-legged, format for each round. So that would be what? 4-2 on aggregate. Yeah, 4-2 on aggregate for Uruguay, but Peru wins the second leg 2-1. Then we have Argentina versus Brazil. We know how that ends. I would say a 1-1 draw in Argentina. And then at home, I'm going to go with a 3-1 win for Brazil. And Brazil wins this 4-2 on aggregate over Argentina. I know Argentina beat Brazil in the Super Clásico de Americas, but I mean, in games where it really matters, they just have Argentina's number. Suriname versus Senegal, going to go with a 2-0 away victory for Senegal. And then Senegal versus Suriname, going to go with another 2-0 win. So 4-0 in aggregate. So my semifinals are Portugal versus Uruguay and Brazil versus Senegal. This is the semifinals of the Antipodes Cup. Portugal versus Uruguay, a rematch of the semifinals of the World Cup. No, a rematch of the round of 16 of the World Cup, excuse me. Oh boy. I'm going to go with a 0, well, a 1-0 win for Portugal, 1-0. And the return leg, I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. And Portugal gets to the final 2-1 on aggregate, but it's very, very fucking close. Brazil versus Senegal. Brazil wins at home. Brazil wins at home. They drew with Senegal in a friendly. Brazil wins at home. I'm just trying to think of a scoreline. Let's keep it exciting. 3-2. And then a blockbuster second leg that ends in a 2-2 draw. And it proves to be the most exciting 2-legged fixture of the whole tournament. Brazil gets to the final. What's the aggregate score? 3-2 and then 2-2. 5-4. 5-4 in aggregate, excuse me. Brazil gets to the final. So the third place game. Uh, for both the third place game and the final, there's no two-legged draw. I'm treating it like the Champions League, where it's just like one game. I know there's no third place game in the Champions League, but I have third place games in my tournaments because I like them. So I picked two random host cities, based on the 32 countries that were participating in this tournament. The two hosts that won out through the random draw were Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, which will be hosting the third place game, and Vietnam were one of the participants in this tournament. I'm not going to, pick a host city that is from a country that didn't even play in this tourney. And the final between Portugal and Brazil, it's in Lima, Peru. So Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, hosting Uruguay versus Senegal, one-legged game for third place for the bronze medal. Gone with Uruguay to win this match 2-1. So Senegal will finish in fourth in the Antipodes Cup. Uruguay will finish in third. And the final between Portugal and Brazil. That would be a classic. In Lima, Peru. This is very difficult. Let's see. If it isn't clear already, I think when Brazil is playing its best, they're the best national team in the world. They've not looked so bright in their last 5 games. They haven't won a game since they've won the Copa America. They're just friendlies, but Tite's been coming under a lot of scrutiny and criticism. And then Portugal, Brazil should win this final. But Portugal, they're a tournament team, right? They were underestimated Euro 2016. They were underestimated in the Nations League. Maybe they won't have a good Euro 2020. They're in a very difficult group. But, they've been making a statement the last few years, guys. Winning the last 2 European international competitions. Brazil, fair enough. Copa America champions earlier this summer. So you have the European champion and the South American champion going off in this Antipodes Cup final. I would give the edge to Brazil, just on sheer quality alone, especially if Neymar were to come back. And remember, they won the Copa America without Neymar. But, this Portuguese team, they seem to be a better side than they were 3 years ago. I think 2019 Nations League Portugal is better than the Euro 2016 team. They seem to be more complete. And it's just, that tournament edge in knockout stage football, I could see Portugal stealing this, especially if it's a one-off. If this is 2 legs, I don't see Portugal beating Brazil in 180 minutes. But this is a one-off final. Brazil will have the home crowd advantage because the final is in South America. It's in Lima, Peru. It's a very tough one. Very tough. I'm thinking maybe this goes to penalties, and Alisson comes up big for Brazil, and Brazil wins a penalty shootout. But I'm going to say 1-0 in extra time to Portugal here. Yeah, I think Portugal will win this. And I'll say that Gonzalo Guedes scores the winner in the 115th minute. I can see Portugal being very compact, holding Brazil at bay for large stretches of the game. But I think they can grind this out, like how they did in the Euro 2016 final. But, you can take your pick. Brazil could absolutely win this. And Brazil has won the most fantasy football tournaments of any team so far. I think they've won 5. And they're probably going to win more by the time the series is over. So I'm going to give the edge to Portugal, just because they've shown it in the last few years. They keep proving people wrong. So Portugal wins the Antipodes Cup. Brazil in second. Portugal wins it. So Portugal in first, Brazil in second, Uruguay in third, Senegal in fourth. Leave a comment below, like, subscribe. This is a long fantasy football tournament video. Hopefully I'll see you guys soon, God willing. Until then, as always, have a good one. Much love and peace.